All right, you guys. This is recording. Mr. Cubic here, talking to you from the man cave. You can see the notes up top. I hope everything's going well. I hope you had a very happy Easter. These are the notes for Tuesday, April 14th. Monday the 13th, I gave you a little video project with the Pythagorean theorem based on 11.6. So this is Tuesday the 14th. And we're doing 11.5a. So tomorrow is 11.5b. I don't know. I think today might be a little bit harder. Tomorrow you won't find very hard. But I got to show you something, and I'll start showing it to you today. It's the same lesson. And your homework is numbers 2 through 26 even, which is 13 problems. Okay? So hope your physical distancing is going okay. Again, I would encourage you to email me or text me. We're going to be doing FaceTime also starting yesterday. So please don't be a stranger. Nothing wrong with that. All right, so I'm going to go get out of this. You don't have to look at my ugly face anymore. Here it is, and it'll be just you, me, and the math. All right, you guys. So I was really kind of thinking about this lesson, and really all of chapter 11 comes down to two properties, or three with the one we know today. Okay, so the first property is if I have root AB, that's equal to root A times root B. So that's the first thing. We learned the other one first. We would learn this, I think, in 11.4, so that I can just spread this out. So this is what we do when we say, for an example, okay, let's say I have root 12, and I say, oh, well, that's equal to root 4 times 3, which is root 4 times root 3, which is 2 root 3. So that is the first thing that we did. That is the property that we use when we learn how to simplify radical expressions. Okay? The other property we know is if I have root A over B, that is equal to root A over root B. All right, so it seems kind of easy. And again, maybe if we said, let's say I gave you, I don't know, root 4 ninths. This is what we saw in 11.3, right? This is an example. Okay? And you would say, well, that's just equal to root 4 over root 9, which would be 2 over 3. So these are the two properties that we learned so far. The third one is the one we're going to use today, and this one's kind of awkward, so I'm going to put this one in blue. And you're going to see it, and you're going to be like, oh, yeah, okay, so I'm going to tell you I'm a little guilty of a small lie. So what if I gave you root x squared? Okay? Well, hopefully, you're like, Mr. Cubic, I know that. That's just a math trick for morons. And you would say, if I took a number and I square it, and then I take the square root of that, that's going to give me the original number. Now, I am not going to lie to you. That's not 100% true. So I have not lied necessarily. I told you the truth, but I didn't necessarily tell you the whole truth. So when you did this before, that's how we did it. It's not quite right. So let me just be a little bit more specific. Let's say I had the root of 4 squared, right? So that's equal to the root of 16, which is equal to 4. So you're like, well, wait a minute, Mr. Cubic. Right? That is right. That is a math trick for morons. But I will also tell you, what if I did negative 4? Okay? I square that, and I take the root of that. So what happens is, okay, you get the square root of 16, and we've already learned that whenever I take a square root, it's always going to give me the positive. So that's going to give me 4. And you have to remember that. It's very important, right? Whenever I take the square root of a number, it's always going to be greater than or equal to 0. So in this case, the square root of x squared is not equal to x, because if it's negative, it's going to make it positive. So the actual rule is the square root of x squared is equal to the absolute value of x. So this is what we are going to be talking about today. Okay? This is what we're going to be talking about today. The square root of x squared is equal to the absolute value of x. And I don't want to really necessarily confuse you. You're going to need it more for tomorrow than for today. But let's go ahead and do some problems. So what I decided to do was, instead of doing just a bunch of examples, I did some odd ones. Your homework is the even, so these are some of the odd ones that go with it. Okay? So again, I would suggest pausing these as we go. But here's number 1, root 121a squared. Well, that's equal to what? Okay? Well, I know by the first property that that's root 121 root a squared. Hopefully you memorized your perfect squares. So that is 11. And then you might say a, but that's not quite right. It's the absolute value of a. So the square root of 121a squared is 11a, absolute value of a. Now, I'm not going to be honest, lie to you. If you said 11a, I don't really have a hard time with that. And in fact, starting I think in 2 homeworks or 3 homeworks, the book starts giving you that as the answer. But technically, if a were negative, it would spit out a positive. So that's why we say 11 absolute value of a. Okay? So again, it's just a small thing. If you don't feel comfortable with it, it's not the end of the world. Okay? So here we go to number 3. Okay? And our problem is root 28x squared. Okay? So again, you can pause this, give yourself a couple seconds to do it. Okay? So I'm going to change this to root 28 and root x squared. Okay? Hopefully that'll come into focus. Root 28 and root x squared. Now, root 28, this is a problem like the one you did over the weekend. Okay? The answers are attached to this lesson. Okay? So that's going to be root 4 times root 7. Okay? And that's 2 root 7. And root x squared, well, that's going to be actually our property. That's equal to absolute value of x. So if you ever want to know, if you look it up in, say, your calculus book one day, if you remember back to being homeschooled on April 14th, 2020, this is actually the definition of absolute value. So if you wanted to know how do you define absolute value, you would say the square root of x squared. Okay, so that's how they define it. So this is going to be the absolute value of x. So our answer is 2 root 7 times the absolute value of x. And again, I'm not going to lie to you. Okay? If you wanted to say 2x root 7, I wouldn't hate you. Okay? Next one. Okay? We're still on this. Root 80, a squared, b squared. So give it a whirl while I get, I don't know, a light blue pen, shall I? So again, let's just use our first property. So this would be root 80 root a squared root b squared. So that would be root 16 root 5 absolute value of a, absolute value of b. The square root of 16 is 4, so you might want to say 4 root 5 absolute value of AB. That'd be one way to write your answer. This is probably what you should be doing tonight. If you're not doing that next chapter, it's not going to be the end of the world. You would also see maybe 4 AB root 5. Again, the answer I've circled would be the better answer. Okay, so let's just review before I move on to the next page. So we started out, these are the three properties you're going to need to know this chapter. Root AB equals root A times root B. Root A over B equals root A over root B. And now we have the new one. That blue looks good on this, right? Root x squared is equal to the absolute value of x. Okay? So we started off with an easy one. So you see the difference between this and the last one, right? So this one, the last one had root 121, right? And you say it's 11, right? So now we have root 121 a squared. So we have a variable inside the house, okay? And it's 11 absolute value of a, okay? Then we did here, same thing. Root 28 doesn't quite work out evenly, right? So I said 2 root 7. And then absolute value of x squared. Well, that's our property, right? Absolute value of x. And then here I just gave you two variables just so you can see it doesn't really change anything, okay? So now we actually get to some of the tougher ones. They're not that tough, but I do want you to understand them. Okay, so I'm actually going to go back to number 5. And I'm going to move on to, I think this is a purple. Maybe it's a mauve. Okay. So I have negative root 9c to the 4th. Okay? So this one is going to be equal to negative root 9 root c to the 4th. So negative, the square root of 9 is 3. And again, that should come into focus in a second. Okay, now, here's where things get a little bit confusing. What number squared is c to the 4th? Okay, what number squared is c to the 4th? And the answer is, right, c squared. Okay, so if I have c squared, that's equal to c to the 4th. So the square root of c to the 4th is equal to c squared. Okay? So you might say to me, Mr. Cubic, shouldn't that be the absolute value of c squared? And I would answer you, yes, it is equal to the absolute value of c squared. But the problem is, c squared, no matter what, is going to be positive. Right? Because when you square it, if it were negative, it would just make it positive. So there, the absolute value is kind of superfluous, right? It's like a third nipple. So it's negative 3 c squared, and that's the answer. You'd find it in the back. So just in case you're wondering, why is it not this, right? Because, right, when I square a number, if it's a negative times a negative, that's going to be a positive. And if it's a positive times a positive, that's a positive. So it really doesn't matter whether I choose a negative or a positive. Okay? Alright, so now we'll go on to the last three. This one is probably the only, this one and the last one, they're all okay. None of them are like brutal. Okay? So now I'm going to some sort of army green, olive drab. Alright, so I'll just put the plus or minus out front. I don't really need that. Right? And then I have root 54. I feel good about that. Okay. I have root x squared. Well, that's just going to be my property. And I have root y cubed. So this one's kind of weird. So we'll talk about that. Okay. So let's start here. You say, well, what's the biggest perfect square that goes into 54? So 27 and 2, 9 and 6. So this is going to be plus or minus root 9, root 6, right? This is going to be the absolute value of x. And this, well, what's the biggest perfect square in y cubed? Well, that's going to be y squared. So that's going to be root y squared, root y. Okay? So just look at that for a second. Make sure you understand. All right, before I move on to the next step. Now, the plus or minus I'm not going to touch. The square root of 9 is 3. The square root of 6 is root 6. Absolute value of x stays the same. the square root of y squared, right? You want that to be y, and if you put that, I wouldn't hate you, right? But it's technically the absolute value of y. And this is going to be weird. That y is going to be stuck inside, okay? So it doesn't have a square to go with it, so it's just going to stay the square root of y. So now, I just take all the things that have square roots, right? 3, x and y, and I put them outside, and I take all the things with square roots and I put them inside. So you could write your answer like this: plus or minus 3, absolute value of xy, root 6y, right? You could also say plus or minus 3 root 6y times the absolute value of xy. Okay? I think either of these would be an appropriate solution. And again, I'm not going to be after this homework, I'm probably not going to be too crazy about this, but plus or minus 3 xy root 6y, that's probably how I would do it. Okay? So 2 more. I know my videos have been about 20 minutes. I think that's reasonable. I go as fast as I can. I don't want to go too fast. I'm going to try a yellow. It's never been done. I think this is kind of orangey. Kind of orangey-ish. Oh, man, look at this craziness. This one actually I don't think is that hard. Okay? So let's go slow. I would pause it if you want to give it a whirl. All right, so this time we're going to use the other formula, which is root A over B equals root A over root B. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to make this plus or minus root 100 f to the 10th over root 121. Okay? Now, root 100 f to the 10th, I could make that into root 100 and root f to the 10th. Right? So my next step here is going to be plus or minus root 100 root f to the 10th over root 121. And now you just go through and do the things you need. So I'll just go slow here. What number squared is going to equal f to the 10th? Okay? And the answer is f to the 5th, which means that the square root of f to the 10th is equal to f to the 5th. Okay? So this is going to be equal to plus or minus 10 f to the 5th over 11. And again, that probably should have an absolute value sign, but if you don't put it here, I'm not going to mark off. That's a hard enough problem without it, right? Because f to the 5th could be negative. But you know what? That plus or minus is going to get rid of it. You don't need that. All right? Okay, last one. And I hope you like this one. All right, so I'm going to tell you what this is not. Okay, so this is limey. I'm going to use limey here. All right, for my ultra special pen collection. Again, you can rewind this and go over in here. If you do this, right, root 11 squared minus root 8y plus root 16, right, you could not be more wrong, okay? That is an epic fail. All right, so you might want to write this note for yourself, right? You cannot distribute a square root. Right? Just like you can't distribute a power, you can't distribute a square root. So you might be saying to me, well, Mr. Kubik, what the heck am I supposed to do then? Right? So how am I supposed to find the square root of y squared minus 8y plus 16? And I'm going to answer your question, young man. Okay? Because it goes back to something we haven't done in quite some time, and that something is a trinomial square. A trinomial square. So, this first number is a perfect square. This last number is a perfect square. Wouldn't it be cool if this middle number, right, made it a trinomial square? If it was equal to 2ab? Well, 2 times 4 times y is in fact equal to 8y. So, this term gives me the a, this term gives me the b, this term gives me the sign, right? So here comes the a, here comes the b, here comes the sign. So this is equal to y minus 4 squared, which is equal to the square root of y minus 4 squared, which is equal to the absolute value of y minus 4. Has your mind been blown? Blown mind? That's why I saved it for last. So, wipe your brains off the computer screen, and good luck. Again, text, call, email, or tomorrow at our FaceTime meeting, bring up a question that you might have. Any of them are appropriate for me. Stay safe. Miss you guys. And good luck. Peace out.